Hello, everyone. We are back testing the Rane commercial RH2, RH2. And last time we did the bass test. This time we're going to go into the mids test. I've got 3 songs lined up. I've got Why Am I Like This, Want You Back, and Tomorrow. We have everything set up. We've got the RH2 plugged into the RME ADI2 DAC, which is our testing DAC amp for the RH2. We are going to use Amazon Music HD as our streaming source. And we're going to talk about a number of things. We're going to talk about sibilance, how we hear it in the vocals here. We're going to talk about separation between bass and mids. We're going to talk about placement of the vocalists, separation of multiple vocalists, and we're also going to talk about soundstage when we get to it. So let's just get started, and we'll come back to a conclusion within, I think, 20 minutes or so. Okay, so let's start off with Want You Back. I've got, what is my volume setting at? It's a negative 45, so I'm going to bump it up a little bit to negative 40 on the RME. And we're going to start with, I said Want You Back, but that's not true. We're going to start with Why Am I Like This? Where is it? There it is. Why Am I Like This? Here we go. And you're going to play, here we go. Yes, thank you. Amazon has this thing where it takes a while to buffer, 2 to 3 seconds. So this is an HD quality, and currently playing at 16-bit 44.1, even though the RME is capable of 24 at 48. Negative 40 is easy listening volume, easily driving these headphones, but I'm going to increase the volume so that I can figure out if there's any harshness, grain, anything like that. So I'm going to go from negative 40 all the way to negative 30, and negative 30 is probably as loud as anybody should listen to this headphone for vocals on this song. Now, Orla has this sibilance in her voice, a little bit of grain in her voice, and I definitely hear the sibilance. It's not as ear-piercing. It's not ear-piercing. When I compare the RH to the RH50, the RH50 definitely has more sibilance in its character. The RH2 rolls that off just a little bit, so it's right underneath my threshold here. You can hear the sibilance in her voice, but it doesn't become fatiguing or harsh to me, but your mileage may vary. You can hear the drum and the guitar. The drum is definitely emphasized, and you can hear the guitar in the right ear cup and the right driver here. So there's a left and right emphasis here, left and right separation. The bass is not overwhelming the guitar, so I can clearly hear the bass, I can clearly hear the guitar, and I can clearly hear the mids. The mids sound about 2 steps behind the mix. Now we've got the drum playing, we've got the guitar playing, we've got, I think there's a piano in here somewhere, and then with the vocals. The drum comes out, boom, 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 but not overwhelming, as I've said. The mids seem a little bit recessed, as I said, about 2 steps behind the entire mix on our imaginary soundstage. But even when the entire mix is playing, you can hear her, and you can hear what she's saying. So last time I said there's a good separation between bass and mids, and that remains true, because even though there's an emphasis in the drum, that emphasis doesn't shroud her vocals. And when the drum comes in, you hear that reverberation carrying through, and her voice still kind of comes right through, right in between. It's like walking down an alley. We got walls on both sides of you. You can still walk right through, and that's the way I imagine the vocals coming out. You can still hear them, even though you've got the bass on one side, and you've got this a little bit of a treble emphasis on the other. Okay, so one of the things with Why Am I Like This that typically comes out in neutral headphones is a flatter bass response and a little bit more emphasis in the treble. Now, when I say a little bit more emphasis, I mean a little bit more detail in the treble. Now, the treble is not particularly detailed because, as I said at the very beginning, Orla has this grain in her voice, and I can't quite hear that grain. I can't quite hear the grain in the S sounds that she's making. I can hear the S sounds, right? The sibilance. I just can't hear that grain. Now, that may be very, very pleasant for somebody. You can sit there and say, I don't want to really hear that harshness in somebody's voice, and Orla may be the type of artist that you sit there and you listen to other headphones, you go, that voice is a little bit too grainy for me. Sounds a little bit too harsh. But on the RH2, it's a little bit, it's a little bit covered over. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say veiled, but it's a little bit smoothed out. The bass is, once again, emphasized. And it sounds a little bit fun, in my opinion, because you get that bass emphasis, boom, 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 but you still get to hear her voice, which is, kind of what makes this song fun. If you get just plain old flat headphones, like say the Sennheiser HD380 Pro, which are really extremely boring headphones to listen to, you compare that to, say, something like the RH2, there's a huge difference, night and day difference, because of that bass emphasis, right? All right, so let's go to our second song, which is Want You Back by Rane. Here we go. We're going to keep the volume at -30, and you could hear the vocalist, but you hear that guitar and the piano, and that guitar has that lingering effect to it. The piano gets a little bit overshadowed, a little bit muddied when the guitar is playing. So those two characters, those two instruments meld a little bit, so you can't hear the exact separation between them. Now you have multiple vocals. You've got the two backup vocalists and the primary vocalist. And when it's just the guitar and the piano playing with the three vocalists, you can hear the separation of the vocalist tonalities. You can hear vocalist 1, 2, and 3. But when the entire mix is playing, those backup vocalist tonalities meld. And so they sound more like one backup vocalist instead of two backup vocalists. The sibilance is pretty well controlled in this song. Again, the primary vocalist has a bit of sibilance in her voice, especially at the very beginning of this song. And the RH2 just slightly underneath my personal threshold. So it's not ear-piercing, it's not harsh. Now we're back down to guitar and piano. And you can hear as the guitar is strumming, is being played, it reverberates just a little bit. And her primary vocalist's voice is crystal clear. And now the backup vocalists are going to start singing right here. You can hear left and right, different tonalities. But again, we're limited to two other instruments here, the guitar and the piano. And then there's this drum beat that comes in very, very lightly. You can hear that as well. And at this point, now we got everything playing, get in the mix. And the bass is playing, the drum is playing. And that drum, it just sounds, fun because it's elevated, but it's not overshadowing the mids. You can still hear the primary vocalist, and you can hear the backup vocalist melded together as one. Their voices are coming out, though. They're not overshadowed, they're not muffled because of that bass response. So one of the things I usually try to find is micro details in songs. So let's go back to the very beginning. And there's a micro detail, I think around 5 or 8 seconds. So let's go find it, and I'll tell you what it is. Right about right here. Yeah. So when she says the word we, she has this emphasis in the letter W. And it's on neutral headphones, on headphones that don't have this kind of bass emphasis. You hear the we. It's like gravelly, right? We. And the RH2 doesn't quite bring that out. It smooths it out. So let's pull it back again to about 5 seconds or so. And let's listen for that again. Yeah. It's just a little bit recessed. That micro detail is just a little bit recessed. You can hear it if you pay really, really close attention. Other headphones, more neutral headphones, really neutral headphones, these things are not, will usually provide that graininess in her vocal. The RH2 smooths it out just a little bit, just enough so that grain, again, just like with Why Am I Like This, gets, you could say it gets lost, you could say it's not present, you could say the headphones are not separating that particular frequency from the other frequency, so it jumps out at you, so you have to pay even more attention to try to find it. So let's keep going. So what happens right around here, about 11 seconds to 13 seconds. So let's go back to about 11 seconds here. Oh, oh. So she says world, and the word world is supposed to kind of resonate like an echo. It's supposed to go from the right ear cup to the left ear cup. And it does that on the RH2, but it doesn't really sound like an echo. It just sounds like somebody is fading from right to left, right? You've got your mixing board there, and you're fading from right to left, and that's what it sounds like. Not really an echo effect. Now, you could attribute that to two things. Number one, these are closed-back headphones, right? So closed-back headphones have a harder time providing this echo effect, this larger soundstage. And number two, it's because right as she's saying the word world, the guitar is playing, and the strumming of the guitar really kind of limits that echo effect, I think, because the guitar is being emphasized. That particular tonality is being emphasized. Soundstage on this song, same with Why Am I Like This, is average. And that's not a bad place to be. The headphones do not sound claustrophobic. They don't sound as if they've got a narrow soundstage, and they don't sound like they've got above average soundstage. So it's imagine you've got decent bookshelf speakers. It doesn't matter which company. Let's say you've got decent bookshelf speakers. These are not computer speakers that you bought at, I don't know. Where do you buy buy computer speakers now? Wherever. You go to Staples, you go to Office Depot, Home Depot, Target. Who sells computer speakers? It's not that. We're talking about good audiophile grade-ish speakers. You plug them in, and you're sitting in your living room. Let's say your living room is, 10 by 10. That's a decent sized, small apartment-sized living room, and it sounds fairly good. That's the type of soundstage I'm talking about. You're not standing outside. This is not a big, expensive theater. This is not HD 800 soundstage. It will never, ever be that. Nor is it a claustrophobic soundstage. And a claustrophobic soundstage, I would say, is something like the DT 1770, or the worst one I've had so far, to my recollection, the Neumann NDH-20, which does have more of a claustrophobic soundstage, and the RH2 has an average soundstage. Okay, so now let's go to Tomorrow by Daughter. And as soon as we start playing, you hear this synth sound, and you hear these. There are little micro details here that the RH2 does reproduce, but it's not particularly clear. You can pick them out, especially if you've listened to songs before and you are familiar with it. You can find those micro details. So one of the micro details that just jumps out, because I've heard the song, I can say it's there. It's almost like somebody is picking on a guitar string, right? They're not really playing the guitar. They're just kind of brushing their thumb on the guitar string. You can hear that. And you can just about hear that on the RH2. Let's keep playing. Yeah, right about here. And now you've got the guitar playing. The guitar sounds like it's muffling the synth sound at this point. There's the electric guitar, and you got the synth. The synth is not well separated from the electric guitar. We've got the primary vocalist, and again, with the primary vocalist here, there's supposed to be a bit of grain. There's supposed to be a little bit of sibilance. She's not as sibilant, in my opinion, as Orla Gartland is in Why Am I Like This? So I'm not picking out the sibilance. It's not harsh at all. But that grain, again, is smoothed out. The guitar is not interfering with her mids. They're not shrouding her vocals. She sounds, the voice is coming directly into my ears, left and right, same as with the other songs. So it's not as if you're getting verticality or depth with these particular tracks. It's just a very stereo effect, a true old style stereo left and right. Her voice sounds about a step behind the other instruments on our imaginary soundstage. But clear. I'm not sitting here going, what is she saying? I can hear her words very clearly, despite the emphasis that we have with the guitar, despite the emphasis that we had with the other instruments in the other songs. I could still hear the vocals in those songs. Same thing here. And now when the drum comes in, you can hear this reverberation, vroom, 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 something like that, vroom, and it just carries through a little bit. Again, not interfering with the mids. Let's keep playing. It's almost like you've got a subwoofer, 5 feet away from you, and you can hear that reverberation. Now, if you were to put your head right next to a subwoofer, forget it, right? Some headphones do that, where you have a severe bass, sub-bass emphasis, and that sub-bass goes wah, 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 and just destroys the mids. You can't hear the mids. The RH2, not there, not like that. So you hear the sub-bass reverberation and the rumble with some of these drums, and the mids still come out despite that emphasis. So how the drums die off, right? That reverberation, it doesn't linger extra long. It's not like you hit the drum and it continues to reverberate for seconds. It's about a second and a half, about that much, where you hit the drum head and it just reverberates and it dies off. So there's just enough presence to the drum for you to get that emphasis, but not enough presence for that drum reverberation to interact with her mids. No harshness, no graininess, even though it's supposed to have it a little bit. No treble peakiness, no ear piercingness. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. The funnest thing about the RH2 is bass. I wouldn't buy these headphones for mids, right? I wouldn't buy them for soundstage. I wouldn't buy them for build quality. I would buy them for bass, good bass. So there's two different things here. You've got a fairly good separation between the bass frequency and the mids. It's not the clearest mids, and that's the second thing. The mids I've heard more clearly, better separation in much, much more pricey headphones in comparison, right? So if I were to compare the RH2 to, what's a closed back headphone that's a decent price or similar price? I can't think of one at the moment at the top of my head. But if you were comparing it to something else completely, say the Sundara, which are open back, planar magnetic, costing $350 roughly. The mids on the Sundara are clearer, and the bass on the Sundara is not as emphasized. Now, there's a slight bass bump on the Sundara, so that doesn't sound flat, but it's not close to what the RH2 does, which emphasizes it several decibels above what the Sundara does. Despite that bass emphasis, the mids still sound clear enough for you to sit back and hear them. When I unboxed this headphone, I said it's a really fun headphone to listen to, and that continues to be the case. Every time I put on these headphones, I think, gosh, I don't think I would buy these headphones for me. I've got so many headphones, why would I buy the RH2? And then I start playing a song and I go, well, this sounds pretty fun. And it's reminiscent of like the Denon D2000, that type of fun. Now, the D2000 doesn't sound like the RH2, but what the D2000 has is this great, amazing bass reverberation and bass emphasis. You give the D2000 power, and you put on a bassy song, and you can feel the ear cups just shaking. And yes, that's distortion, and yes, a lot of people don't like that. But there are times when, even when you are a neutral freak, You like your music neutral. You like your headphones neutral. There are times you got to be honest with yourself. There are moments where you just want to sit there and go, I kind of want to have some fun. And if you put on the D2000, you crank up the volume, and you have a powerful source enough to drive the D2000, you'll have this kind of great rumbling effect. The RH2 also has a very, very good rumbling effect in that sub-bass region. Rum, rum, rum. But it's so well controlled that sub-bass doesn't distort and it doesn't go out of control. Whereas with the D2000, from a very established brand like Denon, which is I think is a very, very good brand for hi-fi gear, their D2000 will distort in sub-bass, and it will begin to overshadow the mids. The RH2 doesn't. That the separation between the sub-bass, mid-bass gets lost. There's no real separation. Separation between the bass and the mids doesn't get lost. There is a very good separation there. Now, what tends to happen with the mids is that when you have multiple vocalists, they tend to blend a little bit in the mix. So as you're sitting there in your mixing booth and you've got those three artists, those three singers on the other side of the window, they're singing in their own microphones. The artist will do any number of things to mix in their vocals. He or she will keep their tonalities as separate as he possibly can on his mixing board, right? Or he will try to meld them together at certain points of the song to add emphasis to a particular lyric, right? The song for Want You Back, they're supposed to be separate. And I know they're supposed to be separate because with excellent headphones that have excellent separation, like the 800 or the Full Cal Clear, that separation is apparent throughout the song. And headphones that don't separate the mids as well, the backup vocalists start melding. I have yet to hear a headphone, to be honest, I've yet to hear a headphone that melds all three vocals together. So I've never heard a vocalist I've never heard a headphone that takes the primary vocalist and the two backup vocalists and then melds all their tonalities together. Not to my recollection. And so in that respect, the RH2 is fairly average, right? It's a fairly average sounding mid headphone. You're not getting the details of the voices. You're not getting the grain that's supposed to be present. You're getting some of the sibilants, you're not getting all the sibilants. And for some people, that's fantastic. For other people who really want to hear that grittiness, who want to hear that sibilance, who are not treble sensitive, who are not sibilant sensitive, those people will say, I don't hear that sparkle in their vocals. And that may be the case, because you're not going to get that type of sparkle. You're not going to get that micro detail. You're not going to get that grain. You're not going to get that, for the lack of a better explanation, visceralness to a vocalist. Orla Gartland's song, I think, is a fairly good representation of what I'm talking about. So Orla has this pretty grainy, rough-sounding voice, unless you've got something else digitally going on that masks that graininess in her vocals. And the RH2 doesn't bring that out. In any portion of that song, I can't hear the grain. But in other headphones, more analytical headphones, I can. What does this mean in total? This means that if you're the type of person that just wants a comfortable over-ear headphone that's cheap, but still has a fun V-shaped sound signature, where the mids are not emphasized, they're not ahead of anything, they're bracketed, essentially, by the bass and the treble, then the RH2 is a very good headphone for that. I think that it really does reproduce that particular signature well enough so that you don't have to reject these headphones outright. There are other headphones that are purportedly V-shaped. You can find a bunch of these on Amazon. And the tuning for those, I think, is probably not as, I was going to say sophisticated, but that's not the right word, as careful. I'll give you the Monoprice retros as an example. You do a pad change on those to bring up the bass. Otherwise, the bass on the retro is a little bit light with the standard pads compared to the RH2. So let's say you have the retro for, I think it goes for $30, $40, a bit like that, and you put on the pads from Brainwaves, the angle pads, that cost you another $20 or whatever, and you get this bass emphasis. But that bass emphasis cuts into the mids, and you lose out on the mids presentation and the detail. The stock ear pads on the RH2 provide a bump to the bass without cutting out on the mids. You can still hear the mids, and they still come through. You can hear what they're saying. It doesn't sound muffled. It doesn't sound as if the mids are distorting in any way. You're just losing out on some of that detail, and you're losing out on a good portion of the micro details mixed inside the particular track. My personal opinion is that the RH2, again, is a fun sounding headphone. It does what I think it's supposed to do. Now, I have to go back and I would have to check. And if you're interested in the RH2, if you're just kind of figuring out what this thing is, if you go to the Rane commercial website, they provide a little bit more information. If you go to Amazon, they have some information about the RH2 and the RH50. And you might get the impression that the RH2 is for studio use, for mixing and mastering. I don't know about that. I really don't think that's true because of the way that it's not really presenting the details that should be present, that are already mixed in on a high resolution file. And it's not really providing a flat frequency, right? This is not a neutral headphone. Putting that to the side, if you want a headphone that goes, I think would probably work really well with movies. If you are the type to watch movies on your laptop, your computer, plugging these things, the headphones into even just a decent amplifier, a $60 amplifier, just so you know you're getting enough power to the drivers, I think you might be a little surprised to hear that this headphone really does provide that rumble effect in the sub bass, but a clean rumble effect in the sub bass. I'll give you an example. I've watched some clips from, what was it? Which Bourne movie was it? The last of the Bourne Ultimatum? Not the last one, but number 3. And there's this car chase in Russia. And you can hear, the really well-mastered cars hitting, the sound of cars hitting. Foley Boys did a great job with that. Cars hitting each other. You heard the drum effect and the soundtrack as it's coming through. And it just sounds really intense with the RH2. And I haven't had that type of fun since the D2000 from Denon. And you're getting that type of fun for a lot cheaper, I think a quarter of the price or so of the D2000. Overall, for mids, it's average. For soundstage, it's average, which is fine, especially for the price. For comfort, I think it's a fairly comfortable headphone. The one gripe I would have is that the ear pads are not breathable at all, and so your ears will get warm after about half an hour to 45 minutes. And depending on your comfort level, you may need to take off these headphones, give your ears a few moments to breathe, and then put the headphones back on. Clamping force, perfect, I think. I don't think I would want any more or less. Sound isolation, not particularly good. I can hear things around me very easily. I can hear my voice, even when we're playing the songs at negative 30 decibels, which is very loud for these particular headphones. So the sound isolation really isn't there. That being said, if this is the type of headphone sound signature you're interested in, the RH2 probably might satisfy you. Now, there are other headphones on Amazon that look very, very similar to the RH2, and, I really wouldn't be surprised if they're using the same driver in those headphones. And they vary in price. You could find some that are a few dollars cheaper, you can find some that are a little bit more expensive, and you might get the same type of effect, same type of sound signature. But as far as the RH2 is concerned, here's the sound signature as I've described. Hopefully this has been of some help if you're looking for a fun-sounding headphone that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. You want a bass emphasis, but clear enough mid so that you can hear what a vocalist is actually saying, and you're not really looking and hunting for detail retrieval, then the RH2 at $50 to $60, whatever it is, might be something worth looking at. I hope all of you have a wonderful evening, a fantastic rest of your week, and I hope that all of you are staying safe and healthy and your families are also safe and healthy. Take care.